Hey yo, welcome to the Godcast.
I hope y'all are buckled up because things are about to get weird.
I don't understand why you chose me.
You want to change the world, son. So do I.
Where are we at in terms of history on the timeline? Where are we exactly? I'm just trying to uncover the truth and bring forth what I can see as the truth. The Bible seemed to be predicting more things than any other conspiracy theory type information, Look, one thing's for certain, that there is so much power in the name of Jesus Christ. That I know for sure.
Welcome to Godcast.
Welcome to Godcast.
The Goodness Over Darkness.
The Goodness Over Darkness podcast.
Here is your host.
Here's your host,
Emmanuel
Kingman.
Emmanuel Kingman.
Welcome to the light.
Welcome to the light.
It's showtime. Hello, everybody. What is going on? Mimi is not here with me today. That is a bummer. Mimi could not be here. She wasn't here for the interview either. So I have to do the intro, unfortunately, without her as well. She has been busy. So on today's episode, I had on special guest Terry Wolfe. Terry is an author, a researcher, a content creator, and a knower of Jesus Christ. And he has put together quite the picture in his vision of the quote-unquote four horsemen of the apocalypse, which actually isn't biblical, but it's actually called the Four Riders. He has a very interesting take on that, and you guys should really pick up his book and check that out. We get into all that in this episode. I mean, this episode is really, he walks you through why he believes where it is, and he's very studied. He's very researched into history, into conspiracies, and into the Bible. And he does an excellent job of breaking it down. He had a really popular TikTok channel that got removed. He was doing a lot of videos on these types of topics, so it's kind of how it's been going lately. As soon as people get popular, they get booted. But I mean, I would have him on a million times to talk. There's so much more we could have talked about, but it was a wonderful conversation, and I can't wait for you guys to get into that one. I do want to announce that I am now a member of altmediaunited.com. It's a cooperative of podcasters that Mark Palmer Steves has put together. It's a vast variety of different content creators, different podcasts that you'll find, and you can get them right on that one website. And I just got added on there, so I'm very thankful for that. You guys can check me out over there. It's altmediaunited.com/goodness-over-darkness. You can find that all there. I am getting ready to do another roundtable here next weekend. So the roundtable will be taking place probably the day before this comes out, I think. So that'll be fun. I can't wait to get going with that. I do have a sponsor I want to pull up here for a second. All right, I pulled it up here. So I have a new sponsor. I sold out. Got a new sponsor. I know I said I'd have no ads, but I sold out. So here you go. Everybody can catch it. My new sponsor. All right, and now we're back. Yeah, so there you go. My first sponsor is the Bible. So there you go. There you have it. Sold out. And I said I wouldn't. How do I do this? I said I wouldn't do that, but I did. So there's my first sponsor is the Bible. I want to give a shout out to all the people who hit me up and did those different voices for me. That was amazing. And if anyone else wants to be a part of it, you can send me an email or hit me up on social media. My email is thegreatchakraawakening777@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am Walks with Nature 1, but there's no E at the end. Instead, it's just 1, just the number. So it's all Walks with Nature 1. And all this stuff's in the links in the description. And my Instagram is the Great Chakra Awakening 777. And on Facebook, it is Godcast, the Goodness Over Darkness podcast. I have a group and a page. So if you guys want to hit me up on any of those platforms, you can, and I'm always going to be doing different things. So I would love having anybody hit me up, and I will put your voice on some of the things that I do. So yeah, if you want to do that, go ahead and just let me know that you want to be involved in the next one, and I will send them over to you. I don't think I have anything else for this episode other than it's an amazing episode about a lot of prophecy, how we can understand prophecy, and just it is a very well put together idea of where we are at in time. And that's really all that we're trying to find out. And there's some things in here that maybe we don't agree on, but we talk our way through it. But we both just have the open mind of it's possible. You know, anything's really possible. That's how you got to attack this. I did want to mention that he has the same name as one of my uncles on my father's side, Terry. He's no longer with us. He passed of cancer some years back now. And he also looked a lot like my uncle Scott, who was on my mother's side. So, and he is a Catholic priest. So it was just like the two worlds coming together, like a conspiracy theorist on my dad's side and the priest on my mother's side, just come together in this one person that I had the conversation with. But Terry is great, and I really recommend you guys checking out his book, at least the audio version. If not, you go support him by buying the book itself. And he doesn't even really do it for the money at all. He just wants the people to have the information, which is why he puts it out for free on his podcast. We're not done yet. So I recommend you guys go check him out. He's a really good guy, and has some really great ideas. And make sure you check out my website, emmanuelkingman.com. Make sure you go to the YouTube Goodness Over Darkness. As I said, I'm going to be doing some more things on there, some more videos, and maybe I'll be doing some regular type of check-ins over there. So we'll see. And always you get the Worship in the Storm live over there. So that comes out in my regular order of my feed on the audio version, but I don't re-put it out on the video because we do it live on the video every other Friday. So make sure you catch that. It's with Andy Rouse from the Deep Share podcast, as well as myself. And I have some episodes coming out where I was a guest on Down the Rabbit Hole. That just came out. That's with Mitch and Tyler. That was a fun conversation I had with them. I also was on. Oh, did my thing just go out? All right, I guess I'm back now. I don't know what happened. I don't know if my left ear just started ringing or if my thing went out, but I couldn't hear my left ear all of a sudden. So yeah, I was down the rabbit hole. My family thinks I'm crazy. Grimerica, it's probably going to be out by the time this episode comes out. I'm not sure exactly when it's coming out, but it's in the next few days. They already put a preview out for it on one of their last episodes. And Expanding Reality, that'll be out soon as well. You guys won't want to miss any of those, even though they're roughly the same thing. They are different. They each bring their own flavor to it. And I'm going to be on the Free Thinker Society upcoming here in a few days. And also, I was on Andy Rouse's podcast, The Witness. And it's a 4-part series, and I was on the 4th part. It was about psychedelics, a roundtable about that. And I get it all into my different experiences on there. So I don't get into the experiences. I got into everything that I have experienced. And I even forgot a couple that I didn't mention on there that I remember doing after I got off of there. So if you guys want to hear about that, we have a pretty good conversation. There's 9 of us in the conversation. It's about psychedelics and their uses, and I get into how they can be traps, not that they are, but how they can be traps, and how the synthetic versions of them are more likely connecting you to something that is not the spirit that is within you, is not God that is within you, but is instead connecting you to the machinery, the matrix. Some people disagreed with that, but that's fine. And I wasn't, I did it multiple times, so it wasn't that I was turned off to it. I did it to see what would happen the second time. And it's cool. It's like to me, it was more like if you're going to do a party thing like that, the one would be it. But I wouldn't recommend that. That's why I said I don't recommend that. There's many options that are better than LSD. There's many things that are natural. And I don't even really recommend psychedelics. Really, anyway, I can help anyone achieve those types of thoughts just in your human being, just the way that you see life, and start to think along those terms. You don't need to take a plant medicine or pharmakeia in order to see the world in a whole new way and to feel the love that you feel from God. You can do all that sober just by becoming a better person, an objectively better person, not a subjective thing. No, like an objectively better thing that someone will look at this, anyone will look at it and say, yeah, that's better. It's an objective thing. So, I just try to please God by doing what makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing. That's all. And my life is paying off in a big way. I put together that video in like a day and a half. Well, no, the video I put together in half a day. The audio took me about half a day yesterday. So it was like 2 days of work really just to get that up. And I never did a video before like that. So, and I was having a bunch of issues with Clipchamp, even though they had a watermark their thing. I paid for it, but they still had a watermark it, and it was going by so slow. Clipchamp, I do not recommend it. Based off of making videos like that, I do use it that's how I've been editing together everything for free. Just like if you're going to do a couple videos like linked together, you could do it that way. But as many different little things as I had to use, it slowed it down way too much. So I don't recommend paying for it. You can probably pay for something much better, but they are cool that's a free service that they offer. So I guess go check them out as well. Anyway, I think that will actually do it for me now. Hit me up for some energy work if you are interested in learning how to meditate and getting a spiritual baptism, or in seeing what's going on in a chakra that maybe you can help. You can do something in your life to clear it out. It's not all about needing to meditate. I can give you advice on maybe something that you're doing that you're not noticing that you're doing, thoughts that you're having. I can try to connect things to you. That's what the therapeutic conversations are all about. That's why you really need to have the therapeutic conversation, so I can talk to you and our consciousnesses can get to know each other, so to speak. I can feel you out and see. I can feel the inside, and speaking to you allows me to then, take a look around, basically. So you get the free consultation, and I will guide you in the direction that I think will suit you best. And then, you can put in all the work, and you do it all yourself, and with God's assistance, by putting you in the proper place at the proper time and having you see the proper things. All right, so hit me up for that, emmanuelkingman.com, and make sure you visit Terry Wolfe on all his different social media and his website, wolfpox.com. And make sure you stay tuned at the end of the episode for a preview of the next episode. And without further ado, here is Terry Wolfe. Hello, everybody. On today's episode, I have on a guest who is an author, a researcher, a content creator, and a knower of Jesus Christ. He is putting the pieces together between conspiracy and this world, which the Bible tells us is ruled by Satan. He is author of the book, Maybe Everyone is Wrong, Revelations, Conspiracy, and the Kingdom of Heaven. Everybody welcome Terry Wolfe to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
With this giant live audience that is... No, yeah, it's great to be here.
I'm thankful to have you on. I had a listener, shout out to Jesus Vargas. He hit me up and he was like, "Hey, check out this this little TikTok thing." So he sends me a thing on Twitter. I go check it out, and it was something hell. What was it called?
Digital hell, probably.
Yeah, digital hell. He sends me that, and I was like, "Oh well, okay, this is interesting." So then he tells me about your book, and he sends me. He's like, "Oh, it's on Spotify." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, let me go check that out." And I've been listening to it, and my mind has been pretty blown so far.
Great. I mean, that's what I did last year. I published that book, and I was hoping, to promote it through social media instead of like paying for advertising. And so I created a TikTok account. I didn't even use TikTok, but I was just going to use it purely to discuss the ideas of the book. And in the process of just explaining the ideas, and I had a whiteboard that I would sketch things out on sometimes and like try to break it down into very simple things that people could, even if you're totally unfamiliar with the Bible and Revelations, you could understand some of the things that I was explaining. Then I couldn't believe it. It exploded in popularity. And in the course of, I think, like 4 months, I got like 50,000 followers. And then
wow,
as of like last month, I had close to 215,000 followers on TikTok.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it went, I had a bunch of videos go viral to the point of like millions of views. Bunch of different shows picked up different clips. Often it wasn't the religious stuff, of course. So it's like, but stuff like digital hell wasn't religious. It was just about the nature of what is coming with the technocracy, the scientific control of mankind. And so, yeah, it got on like InfoWars, like Alex Jones was talking about it on there. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
A bunch of different places, and I didn't even hear about it. They didn't contact me or anything. I heard from secondhand people who were like, "Hey, I saw your stuff on there," and then just last month, they just banned me out of nowhere, permanent ban on TikTok. So now I'm off.
Wow.
But it was getting really huge momentum, and the book has been, everybody who gets the book, it was there from the beginning to promote the book, but as a result, a bunch of copies of the book got sold, and the reviews are great. People are loving it. I'm surprised by that too. I thought it's it's pretty controversial stuff. Like it goes against the grain of everything you would hear in your average church about Revelation.
Well,
Even though
I think that's why it's doing well, because everybody realizes the church is controlling the information that's coming out.
I think so. Yeah. I know when I was growing up, they didn't really, in my church, they didn't really teach that much about Revelation. It was sort of just the accepted thing, which is that, well, someday Revelation is going to, like, as if it's just going to, a button is going to be hit and then it's all going to happen, you know, like it's a singular small event that's really crazy at the very end of the world. And when I looked into it, and the more I started to understand it, the more I thought, oh, this is not about a single end time event. This is a long description of everything from the early church to the end, and it's just coded in different ways. And so that's what really unlocked the whole idea to me, is like, it's not an end time event. It's a history meant to comfort Christians who are under persecution all the way from the early church to the end. And once you understand that, then you understand that God has been looking over us the whole time. The church has been in good care the whole time, even when it seems like it's dying and it's suffering persecution and you're being imprisoned and stuff like that. That's the story of Revelation. It's actually a perfect continuum of the New Testament. It's like the New Testament has disciples, Jesus being killed, obviously, and disciples being persecuted, and Acts in these different places where the church is suffering and they're writing epistles to try to comfort each other and stuff. And Revelation we call it Revelation, but it's just this description that Jesus gives John of what has to happen in the future. It just so happens that it extends all the way till the end of the world. But even the early church could have looked at that and said, oh, so this is what's going to happen. You know, we are going to be in prison. There's going to be a beast system. There's going to be the satanic influence growing across the world. A conspiracy really is what it's describing. It's a conspiracy across the whole world against Christ. And so that's why the subtitle of the book is Revelation's Conspiracy in the Kingdom of Heaven, because it's like, that's the message of the Bible. And that's why I'm sure you saw in the book, I have these quotes from scripture where it's talking about Satan being the ruler of the world. Again, I didn't hear that growing up. I'm just like,
see, that's when I listen to the early stages, the first like 2 or 3, when it's talking about Jesus Christ is saying, Satan is the ruler of this world, and different verses, it just got me thinking. I was like, because for me, I never grew up in the church. I've only been to mass for my daughter's baptism and my own, when I was a baby. So like that's all. I went to Sunday school as a kid here and there, but it's very hit or miss. I didn't really learn anything from the church. But when I started thinking about it, I'm like, how do Christians teach people about the Bible and not tell them that this place is ruled by Satan? So like, why does it seem so ridiculous when we say that there's a cult of Satan worshiping people who are running the entire world? Isn't that just like, obviously, that to me, that would be like that one goes with the other.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel where I do lectures on sort of more specific topics related to this. And, there too, I talk about the continuation of the message of the Gospels all the way into Revelation. And like, if you think about it, Jesus was supposed to come by, be the ruler of the world, in the sense that he would set up this kingdom that would have spiritual dominance over everything. And obviously the Jews, he didn't fulfill what Jews thought that he was going to, so they were disappointed. They wanted a physical overthrow of Rome and all of that kind of stuff. They wanted a political empire. And then he set up a spiritual empire instead, and to cast out demons and liberate people's souls and, give eternal life. And so the conspiracy is this thing that seeks to compete with that kingdom. So there's the dichotomy, the split between the satanic conspiracy on one side and the spiritual kingdom of God on the other side. And if you look at it that way, the New Testament sort of comes to life in a whole different way, where you're like, the epistles that Paul was writing and that you have in these different parts of the Bible in the New Testament is really about trying to fight that conspiracy in its earliest stages, as it's introducing false teachings and legalism and a lot of different sort of false interpretations and false gospels. But then, if you know your real history going back, there was divisions, and that's why I spend a lot of time in the book explaining the history of these things. Constantine and the creation of the Roman version of the church. And
yeah, you do a good job with that.
Thank you. Yeah,
I think
that
history with it. It's a very intelligent concept.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't discover a lot of that is out there to discover, but you just won't find it.
Right. So what I meant was like the four riders. Your idea on the four riders. That is. And tying them together the way that you have. I mean, you walk everyone right through it. It fits really well.
Yeah, I'm sure that's why the TikTok series that I did. I started off TikTok. If I can tell you this, it was hilarious to me. So on TikTok, it's all just about like silly viral videos usually, and or people trying to go viral by doing something really eye-catching. You got 60 seconds, you're kind of in the spotlight, and then people scroll past. And so the idea of getting a part 2 of a video is already insane. Like, nobody makes a part 2 to a TikTok video. It's just there to be in your feed and you scroll past. But every now and then people, they try to get people to, okay, go follow me for part 2, and then come back for part 2, and they're like begging for a part 2. And I went in not really knowing or caring what the rules of TikTok were, and in the sense of like what people generally do. So I made just part after part after part, and I just kept putting like part 3, part 4, part 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It ended up being a 140 part series.
What?
And
wow.
And so I was like, because I have 60 seconds at a time, so I can't explain all of this in 60 seconds. So I'm like, right, here's my next video. Then I have the whiteboard, and I'm, so last time we looked at this. Now what we're going to do is this. And I couldn't believe it, but like people are like, where's part 17? Like, I need part, and then eventually it's like, I need part 98. Where is it? And stuff like, so it went completely against the grain of what TikTok was meant to be. And so the followers that I had on there were very much like about trying to follow my content and this story that I was telling across all of this. And the number one comment that I got was that I made it easy to understand, even when it was extremely complex, historical, spiritual, symbolic, all of these things at the same time. It's really hard to teach because it's not traditional. It's not the way you would learn history normally,
right?
With like people and places and dates, and you go in like it's a school class or something like that. And it's not how the church teaches things, because the church teaches things in purely biblical, doctrinal ways. And so it's a conspiracy theory that weaves into the Bible and history. And I think there was something very unique about the way that I was presenting it, and people were catching on, asking great questions if they were confused about something, and then that would be another video. And so, yeah, I get a big kick out of taking something as hard to understand as that. The idea of the four riders, I should say, I guess, for your listeners, the idea is, if you go to Revelations and you see, there's basically the whole story of Revelation revolves around this idea of a book with 7 seals. And as Jesus in heaven is breaking each seal, it unlocks another prophetic phase of world events. And so the first 4 riders, like people think about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That's not a phrase in the Bible. That's nowhere. You'll never find that. There's no such thing as 4 riders coming out at the same time at the end of the world, and it's war and plague and whatever they all traditionally teach about that. What happens is that Jesus just breaks a seal, And then John sees a rider go out on a horse, and it has a little description, and then another seal gets broken, and then a second one comes out, and then a fourth one, and so like Jesus is really controlling the pace of world events by doing that, if you think about it, because it's like he is the one breaking the seal of this prophetic book, and that book was in the right hand of God. It was written by God, so it's not a bad thing. It's not satanic. It's not Satan doesn't win, and he's not getting victories along the way in history. This is God's plan for how things are going to evolve.
Right, and Jesus is triggering these events purposely to get this show, get it to where it needs to be, right?
Exactly, because there's a big plan that God has in place. And in order for that plan to come to fruition, Satan needs to gain total control over the earth, while the church is still preserved and witnessing and testifying and recruiting in members to this kingdom of heaven. That's the gospel. And so the first rider comes out with the breaking of the first seal, and that's described in the Bible. It's like 2 sentences. It's very short. It's like a white horse, the one who sat on it had a bow, but a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And it's like that's it. That's all you have for clues. And why? So you have to ask, everything has meaning. So it's like, why is it white? Because the second horse is red, and the third horse is black, and the fourth horse is green, although most Bible translations say that it's pale. The fourth horse is actually the Greek word used, because the New Testament was written in Greek. The word that was used there is actually chloros, which is where we get our terms like chlorophyll and chlorine and all these things that are green. And so, and in the other parts of the New Testament where the word chloros is used, it specifically is translated as green. So it's kind of unusual that they would translate it as pale. But anyway, so that's where, thanks to a ex-Jesuit priest that I was listening to years and years ago, he had some great YouTube videos and stuff. His name was Alberto Rivera. He had a theory that the four horses were different parts of the Catholic Church, but his was a little bit different. He said that he thought the red represented communism, because he kind of grew up in the Cold War, and it was like the Soviet Union and China and stuff is all this red coloring and stuff. But that wouldn't be in chronological order anymore, so I think he was still in this idea of everything happening at once at the end. But I was like trying to very much, that's the other thing about my interpretation that is kind of, I can't believe it, but it's revolutionary. It's nobody else tries to take Revelations as a linear sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that happens, each breaking of the seal, each trumpet, and each vial, as it's described, happens in proper order. It's unbelievable. I didn't want to write a book about Revelation. I wanted to go and do some internet research and find out what the best current theory was on Revelation. And as I looked into the best and biggest and most respected interpretations, all of them, I couldn't find a single one that wasn't completely out of order. They would say that the fifth trumpet happens between the third and fourth seal, and the seventh bowl of wrath being poured out happens at the sixth. It's like, who gave you the authority to do that with the Bible? Like,
right,
this is God's word. How can you take I'm also a writer, and so from a writer's perspective, it's just insulting to a writer if he makes a list of from 1 to 10 and you mix up the number. It's like he wrote it that way on purpose. Like, it's just
right.
It really helped to tie everything together once I got on that track.
Right. Well, I can tell you, for me, someone who I was into conspiracies heavily, And then I started to realize that there were a few people that were filtering the conspiracies through the filter of the Bible. And I was like, all right, so I start falling into this rabbit hole. And it turns out that there was a lot of things that matched up, which I was already familiar with, but I wasn't familiar with how much it actually made the worldview make sense from a conspiracy theorist. Like it makes total sense now. I had a relationship with Jesus Christ, and I had some knowledge about the Bibles, but I was very into conspiracy theories. So then it like all merged together for me, and it's like, oh, of course, it makes perfect sense now. Like before, I was confused and didn't understand, and the reason why we don't really understand is because of all the deception. It's all confusion. There's people that are taking it and saying it's metaphor. They're taking it and saying it's this, it's that. I want to take it as literal. When I started taking things literal, I started seeing the connection in a more exact way. And I was like, oh, okay, this is this and this is this. And like you said, you have to take it from the writer's point of view. This was something that was being written and recorded for specific reasons and it made it into the #1 selling book of all time, the most popular book ever.
Sure, yeah.
For a reason. And even though it's been messed with before we ever got to it, hundreds of years ago, books were taken out, and no one actually knows how much the original Bible had. Some people say maybe 500 books, maybe 800 books, I heard the other day. And who knows how many books there actually were, and maybe it would have made things make more sense. But we have to take what we have, and we have to look at it in a more literal, exact type of way. And the way that you're doing it, you're trying to match up like, okay, what goes with this time period and what they're describing. So you're really doing your research in history, which bringing history to the Bible, that then it makes it more real, because then you're like, oh, okay, I can follow these bloodlines that are biblical, and they're still the people who are ruling over us today. And I really like the idea that you have with the Black Rider, the third rider, as being the Catholic Church. Maybe not the Catholic Church, but the Pope, and the black outfit that he wears. That was very interesting.
Yeah. So if I just break down the riders, the idea is pretty simple. When you understand that Daniel had all these prophecies and visions of the future, and he had some of them that described a kingdom that would last until the end of the world. And so that, should be the sort of the starting point of anybody who wants to look at a conspiracy theory that's derived from the Bible. What is this kingdom that is going to last until the end of the world? And he laid out 4 kingdoms. We know that the first 3 are Babylon, then Media, Persia, and then Greece. And then the only one that's logical after Greece has to be Rome, because Rome did succeed after and took over Greece, incorporated a lot of Greek into itself. And so that's the 4th kingdom. That's what's there when Jesus is on the planet. That's why there's Roman centurions, and he's talking to Roman governors, and there's all this Roman power over Judea and over Jerusalem at that time. And it's the Romans who kill Jesus, and they're teaming up with the Pharisees at that time. So the Pharisees hand over Jesus to Romans, and the Romans kill Jesus. So you've got a partnership there between false Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, and Roman enforcement, Roman power to kill people. And so Rome is this historic empire. And today you wouldn't say Rome is in charge of the world. It doesn't look like it. It looks like the United States is the biggest power, and you've got the idea of superpowers, Russia and China and stuff. But what I think what the Bible is describing with these riders that come out and the beast and everything is that Rome stays in power through covert means, through this secret channels, through spiritual power. And so you have Constantine the Great establishing that the Roman Empire was Christian in the year 300 AD, which isn't really the creation of the Pope. Technically, Rome already had a Pope. It was a pagan position. It wasn't Christian. It was called Pontifex Maximus, or whatever the Latin term was back then. But once Constantine established that Rome was Christian, then all of the leaders of Rome had to basically convert over to Christianity. Of course, there was this fake version of Christianity that they didn't understand, because they didn't learn it through the gospel, through preaching and through testimony, the way that Jesus taught. They learned it through Constantine declaring that this was the case, and then they had councils where they went and just basically made up their own interpretation of what Christianity should be. But that's the first rider, is a guy who had a bow, which represents warfare, and Constantine was a Roman general. He was an armed leader. He won battles, and a crown was given to him. He became the emperor, from being a general to an emperor, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And he is symbolized by white, which is the same color as Christianity. It's white is the symbol of purity, of religious holiness, and all that kind of stuff. So it presents itself as being Christian and holy, but actually its real mission is to conquer the whole world. And that's what Rome wanted, to conquer the whole world with a literal empire, but it couldn't sustain that. And so as Rome, the city of Rome, got attacked and toppled eventually, the religious side remained, because it didn't need slaves and thousands of centurions and a traditional empire. So it basically, as the physical empire of Rome fell down, the spiritual empire of Rome remained. And I think that's the first rider. The second rider is at 800 AD, when Rome is again being attacked. It's not as great of an empire as it was earlier, but it's still an empire. Now Rome is under attack again, and the Pope goes and flees north to Europe, basically what is today France and Germany sort of region. And he begs this great general there called Charlemagne the Great. He begs him to come and protect Rome and to use his armies to save Rome. And in exchange, he promises that he's going to make Charlemagne the Holy Roman Emperor. He creates this title for Charlemagne called the Holy Roman Emperor. And there's no such thing. I mean, there was no Holy Roman Empire at the time. He was essentially tricking Charlemagne into thinking that he was going to be a great religious, savior of mankind and of the Christian church and all these things. And Charlemagne agreed. He went down with his armies. He fought back the invaders, and he establishes what is later known as the Papal States, which, is sort of the stronghold of Catholic nations that are ruled. All the kings are Catholic, and it creates what we think of as the Dark Ages, the sort of knights and kings and princes and queens, and the sort of old time fantasy sort of version of Europe that we all know. The round table sort of
King
orders.
Arthur.
Yeah, well, yeah. King Arthur is the mythology that they basically tapped back into. And so, yeah, you have your knights, and you have the Catholic Church with its bishops and cardinals ruling over princes and nobles. So that's something that you don't hear a lot about in school or anything like that. They'll teach you about maybe feudalism and peasants and landlords and whatever around that time, but they don't really emphasize the role of the Catholic Church, which was that for every position in regular government, like king, prince, these different lords over the lands, there would be an equivalent Catholic position. So the Pope was above every king. He's supposed to be the King of Kings, because he represents Christ on earth.
Oh, well, okay.
And the cardinals are right underneath the Pope, and they are the equivalent of kings. So each cardinal can rule over a kingdom, and it's still that way today. You have cardinals, and they go into a nation, and they are essentially, if a cardinal meets with a king or a president or whatever, they're supposed to be peers. They're supposed to be equals. And cardinals always wear red. The Pope always wears white. Cardinals always wear red. That's actually the term cardinal red, which is a specific color, comes from the fact that the cardinals always wore this color. So it's named after the cardinals, not the other way around. Cardinal red, if you ever look that up. Also, the bird called the cardinal, they're red. That's named after the cardinals because that red is so associated with that position. And when I realized, yeah, that's how deeply embedded it is into sort of English language and our whole culture that comes from Europe.
What were the birds called before that?
I guess they just
red birds.
Yeah, they would have just called it whatever they thought. They didn't have a, then now there's scientific terms for them. Right. I don't know what they're called scientifically, but that's just sort of the common name that they got adopted from that. So the association of a color with a position in the Catholic Church is what I thought was so fascinating, because the Pope always wears white. They came first. Cardinals came in later, and they wear red. And then the black one, like you said, you have to go all the way till like the 1500s. So that's Charlemagne was 800 AD. You go forward to the 1500s. That's where you have Jesuits, and the Jesuits are black-robed priests, and they're not very well known today. I think they've been trying to sort of minimize their presence because they're sort of a secret organization. But the Jesuits were created in order to stop the Protestant Reformation from happening, and from a lot of the challenges that were coming against the Catholic Church at the time. And so, yeah, I go into how the black-robed priests, the Jesuits, they have their own Jesuit general who is just as powerful as the Pope. He wears black all the time. The Jesuits always wear black. And they're basically a scientific, economic, occult sort of organization, where the cardinals were like leading the Inquisition and making war, and a cardinal could tell one nation to go to war with another nation, and they would basically had to do it because otherwise they could excommunicate the king. And then the king was legally permissible to kill the king because he was a heretic, and so they could even put kings under trial and
they had tons of power.
They had the total power over mankind. That's why they call it the Dark Ages, is because it was so horrific. The Spanish Inquisition, the Catholics did, they killed millions of people by burning them alive, cutting their heads off, torturing them, all this stuff, just because they would challenge the Catholic Church. Then they would call you a heretic. Anyone who didn't listen to the Pope and the cardinals and the bishops, they would be declared a heretic, and then that meant your life was over. They could kill you, and they would steal your property while they were doing it. And so they made a lot of money doing that. Got a lot of land doing that. And the Protestant Reformation was like this attempt to not destroy the Catholic Church. It was supposed to just fix the errors that they had made and go back to the Bible. So they started publishing the Bible for average people to read. And the Jesuits were basically like an emergency solution. Like, we need a group that can come in and take over the education system, establish schools, do basically anything it takes to stop the spread of average people reading the Bible for themselves and trying to figure out that the Catholic Church was corrupt and the Roman system was not biblical at all. And so at first they just killed and killed and killed and had their Inquisition. And that story is really well documented in a book that I tell everyone to go get, which is called Martyr's Mirror. It was written in the 1600s, and it's largely about Dutch, and it goes all the way back to the time of Christ, and it tracks martyrs who were killed for following Jesus. But a lot of the stories come from firsthand testimony and stories from families and letters and things that were written in the 1600s as the Catholic Church was killing these Bible believers who didn't go along with the Catholic Church. They didn't, like you said, you were baptized as a baby. That's not how Jesus taught us to do things, right? So he said, preach to sinners, and if they repent, then they're saved. He never said go and baptize a baby, because babies are innocent. And so, that's one of these Catholic teachings of baptizing babies, and then you just get confirmed when you're older. That's a trick that they pulled, because then even somebody who's living a sinful life will say, well, I'm a Christian because I was baptized when I was a baby. I don't know I didn't know what it meant. I was just a baby, but I know that it happened. In reality, you're supposed to preach the gospel to adults who understand that they've done wrong in their life. And then that's when they have that conviction of sin, and they turn over their life to God, and they say, okay, I'm going to be saved. I'm going to be baptized, and that's going to save me. So that whole argument was happening at the time the Jesuits were emerging. And yeah, they took over. And I believe that we've been living in the age of Jesuit rule since that time, since the 1500s, where they created the banking system, the legal courts, the universities that we have today, a lot of them, the European ones, obviously, Oxford and stuff like that, they had huge influence on. And now I believe we are seeing the emergence of the fourth rider, which is the green rider. And that's really where, on TikTok, it was sort of getting very real for people as they were seeing this, because I was talking about this last year, but now it's like, now you're seeing this emphasis on climate change and the green movement. And it's like every bank and world leader and institution is like suddenly going green. They're all using this green language for some reason, at the same time that they're making more and more rules about how we can live. They're justifying things based on this green language. We could talk about that if you want, but like, it's kind of crazy that the timing of this is working out the way it is, because I feel like they want to make this green. That was my motivation a lot when I was doing TikTok, was like, I want to try to warn people about the green rider before it actually happens. And then maybe we can sort of like, handicap it before it gets into real power.
Yeah, that's kind of happening now, or trying to anyway.
Yeah.
They're
Right
trying
now
to talk about lockdowns for environmental reasons in different countries. It's crazy.
Yeah. Right now we have the climate conference in Scotland, and if you listen to what they're saying, they're talking about banning red meat. You're not allowed to eat red meat anymore. They're talking about banning private vehicles. You're not going to be allowed to have your own car, especially if it's not electric. So you're going to be forced into public transit, and you're going to be, and you're talking about energy, like physically limiting the amount of energy that a country is allowed to produce and use. And like, they want another dark ages. They want another time of people just sort of scraping by on sort of minimal existence. And that they're going to justify it by saying we're saving the world. We're preventing carbon from coming out. But I think in the prophetic biblical terms, this is Satan making another move and setting up another phase of this beast system, because the Vatican is all in this. Like, they had a conference last month, October, where they invited world leaders or religious leaders from every major world religion to the Vatican. and I made a video on this. It was actually the last video I made before I got banned off TikTok. So that might have been it, because I didn't have any warnings on my TikTok account before I made that. Like, I was in good standing, and then it just went from no warnings to permanent ban with no chance to appeal or, get them to change things. So somebody just decided to kick me off the platform.
Right.
And this was the last video I made, and it was going viral. It was about the Vatican. It was about Jewish, a couple different Christian denominations, including the Orthodox and some Protestant ones. I didn't know who the Protestant people were, but all these Eastern ones like Buddhist and Hindu and like Muslim and everybody, they went to the Vatican and they signed a pact in the Vatican about climate change and about the green movement. And if that's
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you should definitely look that up. I mean, it was in the news, and it was celebrated as, hey, this together, all of these religious groups represent 80% of the world population, is what they were saying. And so 80% of the world is, because the religious quote unquote leaders are saying that they're going to do this, are now being forced into essentially this green cult, this death cult, where they see humanity as being the problem. We produce carbon, we produce pollution, we don't take care of Mother Earth well enough, and Mother Earth is going to punish us if we don't. It's very New Age. It's and I know that you were talking about New Age in your stuff, so I mean, I'm curious what you think about that. But it's like this Gaia Earth worship system. They're going to merge that with Catholicism, and Pope Francis has already written about that, saying that the diseases and famines and weather disasters and things that are happening now is Mother Earth punishing us because we didn't take good enough care of the planet.
Well, that's how Freemasons and Rosicrucians want it to be, is natural law. They want to live the way that nature lives, which is the same type of worship that you're talking about. So it goes hand in hand that they would be doing this together, that the secret societies, political stuff, would be doing this with the church and on climate, that they're coming together on climate and Mother Earth. And yeah, it is exactly the way you have outlined this. I mean, it sounds very, very plausible that this is a very real situation that we're in right now. I mean, this green situation, and even if someone wants to say, well, we're always told it's pale, maybe it could be that this is just it's the Trojan horse is green, but you can't really see it. It's pale. It's everyone coming together. It's the invisible enemy, so to speak, the pale enemy that we're all fighting. But as you said, the word is the original word in Greek means green. So
I will say this too. There's two translations that I know of the Bible that actually do translate it as green. So that's not just mine. Okay. You can go to the New English translation, which is very respected. It has, I believe, like 30 to 40,000 scholars that were discussing the different translation choices in it, and it's got an interesting history. I think it's one of the best translations. It uses pale green, so it has pale in there, but it's pale green. And then I think the Berean Study Bible also has it. And so I did notice that when I was studying it. It's not just that I interpreted it that way. There are translations that actually use it. Some of the newest ones do. And I give them a lot of credit for that, because they're going against a lot of tradition in order to do that. I think the original reason why it was translated as pale was because there's no such thing as a green horse in nature, where there are black horses and red horses and white horses. And sometimes, in very rare cases, the word chloros can basically be used as pale, but it's always greenish. And so instead of saying pale green, they just said pale. Either way, I'm looking at real life here and the conspiracy as it's playing out. And what the description of the pale horse in Revelation is actually sort of the clinch for me, because like I said, each of the the riders in Revelation has a little short description for it. And the one for the fourth rider says, I'm just going off of memory here, but it's basically says that the rider of the horse is death, capital D, death, like the death itself. And Hades follows with it, which Hades is the Greek term for the grave or the underworld where the dead rule, and or where the dead live. I don't, but so death is the rider of this horse, and Hades, or the grave, the underworld, follows with it. And it has power to kill 25, or I guess it says 1/4 of the world. So it's population reduction. Today we call that population reduction. You see people all over the place, scientists and stuff, saying we're overpopulated. We need to reduce the population. There's too many people. We're producing too much carbon. Well, they would love it if they could justify reducing the world by 25%. In fact, the Georgia Guidestones, which I'm sure you know about, they talk about.
I went there this past summer.
Yeah. They talk about, what is it, 500 million people? They think that's the number that mankind should be at in order to live in balance with nature.
Yeah, I will say, after visiting and seeing everything, well, they're definitely from Rosicrucians. It was absolutely made by Freemasons. Everyone there is Freemasons. I mean, like, the entire place is completely laid out in numerology and symbolism, and it's just, there's a lot to it. But I will say that I think that guidestones are there because of a coming cataclysm that is going to wipe out people rather than them wipe out the people. And it's like instructions to restart at a new time period, because it's such a high place, and it's something that's supposed to be indestructible. So I think that they probably know of a coming cataclysm, and that's there for the rules for whoever survives.
See, we're thinking along the same lines, because while I do believe that there's a conspiracy to engineer population reduction, I think that the timing of it is supposed to be in line with some sort of astrological,
Right.
New Age sort of understanding of things. And that's why it's all coded in green language, which green is not just climate, it's it represents this revival, this renewal, this green growth and peace and harmony and balance with nature. And so it's this, even from what I've seen, I've never had a New Age background or anything like that, but from what I understand, the color green is very powerful in New Age thinking, because it represents sort of this healing, regeneration. And
Yeah,
so
the heart chakra is green.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, the heart center.
Interesting. So the idea of there being a massive, traumatic, devastating event that reduces the world population, and that from that point, post collapse, post apocalypse, you could say, that's where this is supposed to kick in. So exactly what I was thinking is that's where this green new world order, I call it the green world order, comes into play and sets up this new rules for how we'll never go back to the way it was before. We're not going to have individual rights. We're not going to have national sovereignty. We're not going to have sort of this selfish attitude about how to live, where I have rights. I get to decide what I do with my life, and I vote for what I want, and I have representation and stuff. It's like, no, instead you have loving New Age spiritual guides and gurus that tell us how to live in harmony with nature, and you don't get to just say no to that. Otherwise, you're just a carbon footprint that we need to eliminate. It's sort of this new rules for humanity is exactly how I see it. So I'm actually writing a book right now to kind of follow up on my last one that is all about that, is all about the merging of New Age with hard technocratic, dystopian science fiction sort of stuff, where it's like you would think those don't go together at all, because the one is sort of like a reversion to ancient pagan fertility and sort of simplicity and living off the land and all this kind of stuff. And the other one is, you think of science fiction, cyborg, super high tech things, but those actually can work together if it's done the right way. And I think that's sort of this brave new world. A lot of the science fiction, that early science fiction was sort of exploring, is the idea of major population centers that are highly technological, and then places outside of there that are really almost like Stone Age, simple, like just no technology. And so there's this sort of major contrast between those. I could see that happening if there was some sort of huge disaster. I don't know what it would be. People think disease, of obviously now they're thinking about diseases because of the pandemic and stuff like that, but it could be different things. And so, yeah, that's all part of the conspiracy theory too. And I'm concerned that if people aren't Christians aren't prepared for the level of deception that's going to come along with that they're going to end up falling into, they're going to basically lose faith, because the Bible says that Jesus says that we're going to be handed over to be killed by, before the end happens, we're going to be handed over to be killed. There's going to be tribulation, and many are going to fall away. And so that's a necessary thing. We can't prevent that from happening. There is going to be tribulation. And as a result, people who are kind of fair weather Christians who aren't spiritually ready for the suffering that is going to happen, they're going to give up on their faith. And I think a lot of what we've been prepared for in churches, kind of the controlled message of the churches, is to weaken people, to make us forget that we have always been destined for tribulation. It's not that God hates us. That's not why we suffer. It's that Satan is evil, and we have to be tested to see whether we are going to keep faith no matter what. And so that was also, a consistent thing I was doing on TikTok was like, let's not only expect there to be tribulation, but let's rejoice, because Jesus says that you are blessed when you are lied about, when you are persecuted, when people hate you wrongly for the gospel's sake. We get extra blessings in the afterlife when that happens. And so that was sort of a running theme of my message there as well. And it's one of the big themes of my book, is that Jesus breaks these seals. This is God's plan. No matter how dark it gets, this is all steps towards the ultimate fulfillment of Jesus coming back, setting up the kingdom on earth, and the good things that we're looking forward to.
So let me ask you this, because I have a radical idea, and you seem to be very open-minded and trying to just find the truth and think outside of the box, because obviously, Christianity has boxed everything in. Are you familiar with alternative history and Tartaria, the mud flood?
I have looked into it as much as I can. I don't know if there's more that I'm missing, but I've tried to look into it.
Okay. Yeah, there is a lot to it. I mean, you can spend like so many hours just on like one little aspect of it. There's so much to it. It ties in with the World's Fairs, and
yeah, I've looked into that. Actually, I'm writing about that in my book.
Okay.
So my understanding of all of it, I watched probably about 3 or 4 hours of stuff on people trying to compile it, and I read books on the World Fair, the Chicago Fair that everybody points to. So a lot of what I do in this book is I say that maybe this is true. Maybe there's the conspiracy theory is true, because what I do in the book is I go through these different conspiracy theories and I say that they have a point. There's something that they're getting right, but ultimately where their conclusion leads can be dangerous. And so, it's kind of like, well, there's so many examples, but like a lot of these conspiracy theories, you're listening, you're like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about that before. and then you get hooked and you start to really want to know more and know more. And then at the end is when they say, and that's why this, and then their conclusion is totally different than what the Bible says, right? So in this case, from what I understand, this ties in with the idea of Antarctica being really significant, of I don't know, I've seen it merge basically with the flat earth idea. Even if not, there's the hollow earth idea, the idea of the Nazi experiments, tying in with aliens, the Freemasons sort of having the black sun in the middle of the earth. And I think I'm a skeptical person by nature. So my first reaction is to say the World's Fair official explanations for it make sense to me. They say that the buildings that you see in the World's Fair were plaster and, plywood. It wasn't actually, they didn't actually build monuments, in just a year.
Right.
And it also wasn't an ancient society.
But they do say that out of every place. So what the weird thing is about the World's Fair is, okay, maybe they were used plaster and wood, but the weird thing is that every major city, this was just after a fire, major fires in the
Yeah,
cities.
Chicago fire was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, not just Chicago, but literally every American city that hosted one. They all had a huge fire right before. And why would you waste your time building up all this temporary structures and then breaking it down? But not only that, then they kept around many of the buildings still exist today as museums, as high schools, as government buildings.
Right.
So how was it just kept around if it was only plaster and wood? There's no pictures of it being built. It's only pictures of it finished with different like scaffolding around it. It's very odd.
It is odd. I mean, the explanation that sort of the simplest explanation is that they were driving tourism to a place that had been devastated in order to generate a bunch of income so that they could reconstruct a city. Some of the exhibits at the World's Fair definitely make it obvious that it was just like a traditional convention, a fair, an expo where you have.
Well, it's weird even what they did with that, because they would have like 3,000 to 4,000 different people that they would bring in from around the world, and they would put them on display as savages. These different tribes. I mean, it was super racist. All the stuff they showed people's brains and how it matched up with your skin color, how dark you were was a smaller head, and it was super, super racist. The incubator babies. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with that.
The 1800s, late 1800s and early 1900s, that was the scientific sort of approach of the day, was this sort of eugenic phrenology, I think, is where you measure the head and the features of the head and categorize races based on features like that. So it was definitely not good. And these were greedy, imperialist, colonialist sort of ambitions, trying to get the billionaires of the world at the time to come in and buy into whatever the new technology was. Electricity, as we have it today, was really new at the time. And so they were showing off electricity as much as they could. And they were tram cars, going along the wires and stuff like that. But when I looked into it, it's like people were saying in the conspiracy theory stuff that I had seen about it, they were saying like this had never been seen before, tram cars running on electricity and all these lights and things like that. And it's like, well, okay, I looked it up, and Russia had that, 20 years before this World's Fair, and London had it, 15 years before that. And it's like,
that's the weird thing about it. So what you're saying is true, but what we're presented with in school is, when we find this out today, it's like, what, they had that back then? Like, why, a lot of their things were actually better than what we have today. And it's like, why did they get rid of that? And the people really don't fit in the cities. When you look at it, the mud on the roads, it just doesn't fit with how beautiful these
That's for
structures
sure.
were,
Yeah.
and the mud covering up the buildings as much as they are, and not just buildings, but all the statues around the world. I mean, Easter Island, like we have these
Mm.
huge amounts of mud are just covering everything all around the world. So, what my radical idea is that we are living in the time that we're actually past the rapture, we're actually past the second destruction of the earth by fire, which happened in the 1700s and 1800s.
Mm.
Uh, which is it goes along the lines of in 1812 France was at war with Russia. At the same time they were in war with the quote unquote Indians in America. You had, so it was literally a world war happening, but we're just not told it's that. Then we have 4 years later we have the year with no summer, which lasted for several years, the full effects, but the sky was darkened, the sun was blackened for a whole year.
Right,
Then
right.
we had the Carrington event in 1859, which was some kind of plasma CME event that was really affected our magnetism, the Earth's atmosphere. The magnetosphere, I should say. It
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh yeah, the Carrington event. So they had telegraphs at the time, and people working on the telegraphs got shocked. It was the largest. If it happened today, all of our grid would be knocked out.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so this was
So
all
like,
happened in the 1800s, along with the World's Fairs and all that. What was your question?
I was just gonna say that sounds like what they're talking about. It might happen again soon, which is this sort of solar flare
Right.
EMP sort of effect where it just takes out all the electronics.
Right. So I think this is actually the time. I think the Carrington event was somehow when Satan took over the earth, the way that the Bible describes Satan will be loosed upon the earth, that maybe the millennial kingdom has happened, and that maybe they call it the Dark Ages because they're inverting everything, and maybe it was actually the enlightening period, and then they call the enlightening period that, but it was actually the dark period when the transformation started happening in the 1500s.
So
um,
here's what when I was writing about this, I was, I tried to go along with it as much as I could, but what I didn't understand was that the theory does not explain why our great grandparents, and people that you can essentially, you can go back to a time when we have their writings, we have their actual a good understanding of what people thought at the time, newspapers and everything from journals and diaries and things from this time. Just the late 1800s is not that long ago.
right,
So
that's the thing.
it's like, why do we not have thousands and thousands of testimonies about what life was like in this sort of last phase of a or this new phase, I guess, is what you're suggesting, is that there's this apocalyptic event that almost destroyed everything, but then these cities remained, and people had some of this technology that is better than what we have today in some cases. And it's like, well, shouldn't we have just a legacy of documentation on
So
that?
my thinking on that is, well, with the incubator babies, I think that's a big part in this, and the orphan trains. I think it was a very big part in this, in that they kind of mixed the kids up, and they started indoctrinating them into Prussia-style school systems, so they didn't have parents. I mean, there were 30,000 children in New York City that were just grabbed up by these people and sent all over to farms. So, I mean, how many of those people just were slaves their entire life, but we're not even told that. So
But I mean, like my ancestry goes from, I'm in Canada, so I go from central Canada. My great grandparents came from Prussia, from the Eastern Russia, that sort of area, or I mean, Eastern Europe. And I know the history of how the churches, and this is a church history. This isn't like government propaganda. So it's like, I know the history with Catherine the Great in Russia, and the wars that were happening, and they fled from there to here. And like, that's a separate history that is not at all influenced by a government propaganda. And it goes into all the way back to, like I said, the Martyr's Mirror, which is written in the 1600s. I have a copy of the book. It's got firsthand letters from people who were living in the 1600s describing the Catholic Church's Inquisition in detail, court transcripts of the conversations between the priests and these farmers that were getting called heretics. And my people came from out of those martyrs, the Anabaptists. It's like, I don't see any gap in there that would allow for a radical rewriting of history. So whatever it was would have to have avoided entire populations or something like that. But how do you account for other histories like that?
I do agree with what you're saying, that it would be, like I said in the beginning, it's a very radical thing, because it would be as if there's some kind of pocket of time that's like out of time or something to this effect, that there
it would have to almost be like paranormal in order to have.
Well, that's kind of what, I mean, if it was that is a paranormal type of thing.
Yeah.
So there are other things. Emmanuel Swedesburg, are you familiar with him?
I've not heard of him.
So Emmanuel Swedesburg was his new name given to him. He was a scientist in Sweden, and born in, I think, 1700. Was a very top scientist. Then in 1747, on Easter Day, Jesus appears to him in his spirit form at the end of his bed, and he becomes a prophet. And there's actually a branch of Christianity. I always forget to look up what branch of Christianity is in his honor, but he predicted his death like 8 months before. He said, I'm going to be no more, or something to that effect, on like March 29th. And then he died. And he said that the rapture was about to occur. And so he became a prophet for like 20 some years after being the scientist. So he was very much like, bringing the two worlds together. Like, he could understand it on a whole nother level. So then right after that, we have the Jesuits are exiled in 73. You have the Illuminati and America are both started in 76. You have all the constitutions for all around the world in the Five Eyes. Their constitutions are all the late 1700s, early 1800s. Then, like I said earlier, you got Napoleon, you got the Year Without Summer, you got the Carrington event, you got the different World's Fairs, and you also have a huge jump into the psychiatric care in the psychiatric field in the 1800s. So maybe the people who wouldn't go along with the message were sent in these psychiatric fields. Like, so if we think of it in terms of what's going on today, if there was a group of people who were trying to get the next generation to forget about what was happening the way that we see it, there are very many people that still exist on this earth today that believe the world is one way, right? So if they were to say in 20 years that, those people that didn't wear masks killed 20 million people, and they started telling history that way.
Right.
And anyone who didn't go along with it ends up being killed or sent to a psychiatric hospital and experimented on. Well, then it kind of makes sense as how they could get away with something.
Yeah, there would have to be a cover-up sort of a magnitude that you're gaslighting an entire generation of people around the world, which is obviously now the technology is like, in our pockets to do that. But I honestly, I love rabbit holes. I love theories. Like and this, what you're talking about, I don't know if there's a concise label for it. I always think of it as tartaria, this idea of the that's basically
it goes
what
along
I
with tartaria.
And so I looked into it as something I enjoy. I looked into flat earth. I looked into quantum field, quantum physics, and this whole idea of multiverse, like maybe we're in a different timeline than we used to be. And so I investigate these things out of personal interest because I like researching alternative history. And then what I keep coming back to is to not lose sight of the fundamentals of the Bible, because that's sort of your guide to the priorities of life. So maybe there was radical periods of history that are completely erased, or I guess you can't say completely, because we have, this conspiracy theory still that is trying to piece this together. As far as I know, this theory has only even emerged in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is pretty suspicious to me. I mean,
It is, but it's the mud floods that really do it, because when you start to see these buildings and they're all covered up, and then you have so many other places, New York City, San Francisco, that are all built on hills, and you can see that there's actually windows and doors that are underground that they just built a ground. They put cement over the mud that was there rather than clear it out. But it does, see, to me, I can line it up biblically, because I'm looking at it from that sense. I'm looking at people who are doing it from that sense. And in the Bible, and also in the book of Enoch, it says that the mountains will melt like wax, and that it's going to be a destruction of fire. So the way, I don't even know where this prophecy is, but there's a prophecy that says the behemoth of freedom will come up against the Leviathan of royalty, and out of that clash will rise the phoenix, will rise from the ashes, and then the seven-headed beast with the 10 horns will then have the power. Well, when I see that, that's like the Revolutionary War of freedom versus, or United States versus England, and then Rome or the Vatican rising out of that again, with now possibly China being the seven-headed beast with 10 horns, as in they're paying and they own the different rulers of these lands now, 7 continents. Maybe there's 10 different heads of these continents.
Yeah, there's definitely, I keep seeing, when I was seeing this on TikTok too, I guess the algorithm of TikTok is designed to sort of figure out what you're interested in and feed you more of that. So as I was getting more into it on TikTok, I kept seeing more alternative history stuff, and definitely there's a lot of people pointing at the different world organizations that have exactly 10 member nations, and so they point that to the 10 horns of the beast and so on. In my theory is obviously much more sort of just conservative, and tries to make the easiest to understand interpretation of still accounting for all of these things, but getting the message across of what the sides are in the conflict. So like the Whore of Babylon being the central figure of towards the end of Revelation, I identify that with future Jerusalem being united with the beast, because the whore rides the beast in Revelation. So the beast being the Roman Empire. So you have the partnership there between those two, and this theory of the alternative history that incorporates sort of all these things, as long as people are like you said, open-minded and willing to say, let's say that there's something there. There's some amount of, we have all these different clues. We don't know how to put them together. As long as we don't have any particular like leader coming by or some group coming by and dictating what to make of it, I don't care how much people look into anything. It's like, but what I fear is that it's going to take on a life of its own that is going to supersede a lot of the common sense principles of like Christian living and what we should do about this. Like, for example, one of the things I see is that, okay, well, if this Tartaria super society existed, we should try to go back and look into what they believed and recover this, sort of like archaeologists go back and try to recover their teachings. And that's dangerous, because whoever controls this narrative, I know it doesn't seem very controlled right now, whoever's controlling that narrative can end up saying, oh, those people, they believed in sort of this multi-religion thing where there's many gods and there's, this kind of thing. It's so now suddenly idolatry is getting slipped right in and associated with the theory. And I can like the theory, I can like questioning things, but there's a danger of slipping into essentially a different road that leads to the same path back to this new age sort of thinking.
Right. And I've talked to many different people who have many different ideas of what the Tartarians were. And it's, when the Bible tells us and the book of Enoch tells us Tartarus is hell, I tend to think that it's probably hell. I talked to somebody named Michelle Gibson who talks about the Americas maybe being Lemuria because of the Moorish people that lived in the Americas. And this is actual history that still slips through the cracks every here and there, that you can find the Moorish people. So maybe there were different things on Earth at different times. Maybe Tartaria was a bastardization of what was something beautiful in a Christ millennial kingdom type of sense. I'm not real too sure on anything. I like the possibilities. I like adding in new information as it comes along. And I love your idea. Like I said, I had you on because it was really blowing my mind in how concise of a story it is. But I'm also of the awareness that we're in a fractal nature of reality where it's all repeating itself on grander and smaller scales. So it could be many different things happening at once. It could be exactly as you've described on one scale, and on another scale it could have happened in certain parts.
I see.
There is going to be one completely grand thing, I believe. And maybe that's the line that you're on right now because it really makes sense. But I do see how different things always have fit in different places. And that's what really makes me think that we're in the age of deception, that Satan's on the earth, because you can honestly find anything that you want and you can find a lot of evidence to believe whatever you want. And then you're just going to have cognitive dissonance. So
right.
For me, I just like to open the possibilities. I just wanted to say that the church is that was named after Emmanuel Swedesburg is the new Christ Church.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of him, but that
He'll interest you if you check him out. He wrote a book called something about the second coming of Christ in 1757. What was it? Trinity in one person. No, so these were his notable ideas: were Trinity in one person, and he had a correspondence. The Last Judgment and Christ's second coming began in 1757. So this was part of his visions he was having. He went from like an atheist to seeing Jesus Christ on Easter of all days, and starts talking about this, predicts his own death, and he died in 1772, which the Jesuits were then exiled the next year, so on and so forth. So it's all very interesting timing.
It is. And the timing of things is, for me, what I see right now is a timing of breaking down our sort of in the big picture. It's about breaking down the scientific traditional worldview that I don't have any particular love for. I'm not a materialist by any sense. I know that there's miracles. I know that there's all sorts of things we can't explain using science. But it's about trying to break down the rational, traditional worldview and make way for what I think the green world order is going to be, which is this post-logic world of where your feelings and your intuitions and people's sensitivities, that's why you get all this political correctness about people's feelings being more important than facts and things like that, is that they're trying to set up this revolution, the green world order, where they're going to rule over people using superstition and confusion instead of sort of this clear, no, this is what the science says, you get taught in school, and they try to educate you to believe a certain thing. Instead, it's going to be everybody has their own personal truth, and you don't have to worry if it doesn't make sense to other people, as long as it makes sense to you. That's a separate kind of danger. And I was going to write, honestly, I was going to write about it as more like, just don't believe any of this stuff. Don't believe in tartaria, don't believe in quantum physics and in the idea of string theory and any of this stuff. And then what I did when I looked into it enough, I'm like, there's no point in saying that, first of all, because people are going to do their own research, and I can't stop people from reaching their own conclusions, even if I told them otherwise. And what I can say is just that if you call yourself a Christian, here are the fundamentals, and here's where I start to see red flags in different movements that feel very like they're uncovering new truths, but they're sort of just these guide rails that I hope people don't go beyond, and warning signs to look for. So in that sense, I hope that you would like it. I hope that your audience would like it. I just barely finished the first draft of it, and it's all about these different rabbit holes. The book that I did publish already, Maybe Everyone is Wrong, it's more like if you want to just go through Revelation and get a thorough, connected, sort of like easy to understand history of how this is possible, that all of this is one great prophetic timeline. And so I'm open to a lot of different ideas, but at the end of the day, what I do is I come back to sort of the fundamentals, and I reconcile things back to that. So if there was, for example, like you said, the fractal nature, the idea of the things that happened already once before, and or many times before, perhaps in different scales, that is certainly a conversation I was having on TikTok with some people who are like, doesn't this seem like it was already fulfilled? Like these things, look over here, these prophecies already came true. And it's like, well, yeah, it feels like it came true on one scale and in this one place. But there does seem to be a greater thing that's still building up. So it's like echoes of what's already happened.
It's super confusing.
It is confusing. And that's why, I enjoy carving out sort of the narrative that I figured out. The hypothesis that I have is my best attempt at allowing for previous fulfillments, miniature fulfillments to have happened, but still looking at the real warning signs in our faces of how this is all still like the current danger is, I guess, what you could think of it as.
Okay.
Of like I said, the green movement, the pattern that happens, I think, is that each rider of Revelation reaches a certain pinnacle of power, and then it hits a crisis point where it can't sustain anymore.
Right.
And then it has to incorporate a new dimension of power.
So where do you think AI fits in with the new Green Deal?
I think that AI, for the most part, is a red herring. I think that it's not nearly as powerful as people are hyping it up to be. For example, like people talk about China and the social credit score and all that kind of stuff. It's like the algorithms and AI and computer programs have a limit of how they're never going to hit that thing where they actually become self-aware and it becomes a real thinking operating system. But what it can do very easily is be used as a scapegoat for justifying horrible policies and horrible inhuman actions against people. Because what they can do is they can say, and you're never going to look at the code, right? You're never going to see the code of the AI and be able to determine for yourself whether this is a living, intelligent computer or not. But what they can say is that the AI is telling us that we need to do this and we need to do that. So we need to shut down these oil pipelines here, and we need to, evacuate these people from this island, and we need to, whatever they want to justify, they can just say an AI told us to do it.
Right.
and they can make it happen.
The data showing.
The data shows, yeah, just like invading Iraq based on, bad intelligence. And it's like, oh, years later, after they've done everything they wanted to do, they can then come out and admit that there was some bad intelligence. We had some bad reports that turned out not to be true. I see it as being a scapegoat and an excuse. Okay. I've read a book from Leo Zagami, who is this occult Illuminati insider type figure. He's written a bunch of books, and he might be interesting for you to have on as a guest. But
what's his name?
Leo Zagami.
Zagami?
Yeah, he's an Italian. He claims to have been part of the Illuminati and part of this Illuminati family. And he's been a guest on Infowars a bunch of times. And
I'll have to check him out.
He's pretty good at exposing certain aspects. But like all these other guys, I kind of listen to their criticisms of things and then I ignore their solutions. I think he's got a lot of Catholic remnants in what he teaches, and he's not very biblical, but he does a good job of exposing certain parts of the conspiracy. Anyway, he was talking about, he wrote a book called, I'm not going to remember the name, but it's all about 666, the mark of the beast, and the idea of AI being tied together. Everybody being connected to this AI, and then the AI gets taken over by a satanic, maybe Satan himself or some sort of demon. And then through cybernetics and through some sort of technological system, a demon infused computer can go and take over all of these slaves to the system. And this sort of the grand idea of how they could pull off the mark of the beast using some sort of combination of spiritual and robotic technology, AI. And it just doesn't, to me, I know I'm a skeptical person. It just doesn't sound like it's going to happen. It feels to me like something that the conspiracy itself would tell its own members.
It sounds like Project Bluebeam, possibly.
It sounds a lot like Project Bluebeam. It sounds a lot like these other things where you hear about miraculous level technology that you never see so far, but it's kind of the science fiction thing that I believe that the people inside the conspiracy need to have their own narrative. You know what I mean? They don't know that they are just being tricked into killing people and to being satanic.
Right.
They think that they have secret technology. They think that they are going to execute the grand plan to...
Well, they did have cell phone type of technology 70 years ago, maybe not exactly as we have it, but they are way more advanced, and we had no idea about it back then. So, they
absolutely. They have suppressed patents and technologies. I believe totally that there were water powered cars, 100 years ago of like, hydrolysis converting water into hydrogen in the fuel cell itself. And so you don't need to store hydrogen. You can just pour water in the fuel tank and drive around. And these the innovators who create that were killed, and their patents were locked up in the name of national security. There is suppressed technology, and a lot of it is amazing, and it would change the world forever. And it's being suppressed so that corporations can make as much profit as possible with inferior technology. And I also believe, and I talk about this in the book, I believe that all of the suppressed technology is going to get unleashed at a strategic point in time as part of some new narrative where they're going to say the aliens are giving us
the great deception.
There's going to be this great deception where they're going to say this is the ancient aliens. And how easy would it not be for them to say these ancient aliens that are responsible, like that new Marvel movie, the Eternals? It's like the same exact plot. It's like these ancient beings were looking over mankind this whole time and guiding our evolution and guiding our development. And now they've returned, and here's all this magical alien technology. Meanwhile, it's just human innovation that they've been suppressing. But they'll say that it's part of this new religious sort of awakening that's going to happen. And I can see Tartaria alternative history falling right into that trap, because they could say these are the people who created the Tartarian utopia, or there's different ones that I've seen too, Scythians and different names of historical groups. And they're like, these are the same people who gave those ancient societies that we're not taught about, that we're sort of learning about now. It's all part of this grand narrative of hidden information that we're now all experiencing at one time. And then who would not, if you saw miraculous technology, you would be like, this has to be true, because traditional science doesn't explain how this is possible.
Right.
And I feel like there's a deception level that's coming up that everything is building up to. And my sort of warning to people is to just keep things, explore whatever you want to explore, but at the end of the day, keep your beliefs simple in the gospel and in, loving your fellow man and caring for people. Right. And, being human and acknowledging that you don't know, and that God is the one who knows, and that we're going to find out in the next life. We don't have to commit to different ideologies in this life. Even I'm fascinated by all this stuff, but I'm scared that the smartest people who do the most research and are the best equipped are going to be the ones who fall the most into the deception if they play their cards right. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to feel like it proves all the things you believed were true. It's going to feel like you were proven right. And that's going to be how they get you, because they can shut down the internet at the same time that they have Project Bluebeam kind of level stuff going on. Suddenly you can't communicate, but you're seeing crazy things. And then now we're just sort of supposed to figure it out on our own, and you're just seeing clues. And there's so many different ways they could play out the big deception, leading up to sort of this revolutionary new age rethinking of everything we thought we knew in science, in religion, in tradition, in history, in everything. And I guess that's sort of, in a way, it feels like a cowardly way to do it. It's like, oh, well, you're you're not willing to like really say that you believe this, and you're not willing to face this hidden truth or something. But I see it more as being like these alternative views, the rabbit holes that I'm describing in this book that I'm writing now, are interesting, but they're not important in the spiritual dimension of things. Like, and every time somebody tries to tell me why it's important spiritually, it doesn't play out quite right. Like, it's like, yes, you should try to get as far away from the conspiracy and the false teaching as possible. But like, what is the danger if I just stay with what I learn in the Bible when I study the Bible is the gospel and stuff like that? Like, there can't be any danger in doing that. So just kind of be warned, beware of wolves in sheep's clothing that can come by and be like, I'm going to expose the fake teachings. And there are a lot of fake teachings. There's a lot of lies, like NASA and so much of things that we've been taught. I'm not defending those things, but the alternative can be its own trap.
Right, it's its own maze. There's different levels of awakened states, as they say these days, and you go from one state of being asleep to the next state of you think you're awake, but you're just going with every conspiracy theory. Then there's another stage and another stage and so on and so forth. So you really have to grow your spiritual discernment through a relationship with Jesus Christ. It's really the only way to do it, because he'll chase away everything that doesn't belong, because he is the truth. So if you have him in your life, the more you have him in your life, the lies will just keep falling and falling away from you. I want to hit you with this idea before we go here. I have this idea that you and I right now, we're interdimensionally speaking, that when we're looking through our computers, our TV screens, our cell phones, we are actually looking into another dimension. John D., used to use this with Black Obsidian, the Black Mirror, the Netflix show
Right.
Black Mirror. Hyperspace, maybe that is actually outer space. These beings are traveling interdimensionally, and this is where maybe Project Bluebeam and 5G both combine with this idea of the Black Mirror, and maybe that's how they do what you were saying. That one guy, Leo Zagami,
Zagami, yeah.
was suggesting maybe that's how they do it, is that they're actually coming out of the technology because they are, like, we are electrical beings in an electrical universe, and maybe they are lower frequency electrical beings who come out of the electricity. When the Carrington event occurred in 1859, what that triggered was 1860, the seasonal flu started. Then between 65 and 67, anxiety and depression both started, which are electrical frequencies in our brains that would be off, that would be making us feel some type of different way. Our bodies are very in tune with electrical changes in the atmosphere. Whenever there's a new flu, you can be sure that there's some kind of new technological advancement. The Spanish flu with the radio waves. I think it was the Hong Kong flu
Right.
with the microwaves. The 3G and 4G were the bird flu and the swine flu. All these things always lined up. I have a book coming tomorrow about somebody who really breaks this down. I can't wait to read it. It's called, I think, something, the magnetical rainbow, something rainbow.
If it's the one that I've seen, it's something like Beware the Invisible Rainbow, or
It might
something.
be that. Yeah, the invisible rainbow.
I'm not. I've also, I was considering getting that. And I love the idea that there's that, because that's like a scientific explanation for something that is
Woo woo.
Yeah. Even if you didn't, you weren't religious at all, you could understand how, we do have electrical impulses in our brains, our bodies, and our hearts are all electrically driven.
Yeah, our nervous system.
Yeah, our nervous system. So why would it not be connected to massive signals? The fact that you can put up a piece of metal into the air and connect it to a tube in a simple old TV, and you get signals of pictures and sounds coming out, is proof that these waves are going through us, they're going through the buildings, they're going through everything. And then, radios and all these things. And so I do believe that there is something to that. And for what it's worth, I know people personally who try to do healing with frequencies, and the idea of like sort of trying to offset this in some different ways. And it feels very new age to me. It feels like, I don't know what that person's doing. I don't know if that person, spiritually, if they have anything, some sort of ritual going on or anything like that. I don't personally want to dabble with it because I don't feel like I need to, but I really like the idea that there's a magnetic electrical foundation to not just life, but like intelligence, almost, you could say, like and then the immune system being tied into it. John Dee, I looked into. I have a book that I really like. I'm not finished reading yet, but it's on John Dee, called something about the Enochian. Man, I wish I could remember the title now. It's something about the Enochian language, and John Dee and the Empire of Angels, I think it's called, and then the subtitle something about Enochian, and it's tied into the Book of Enoch and the whole idea of how he was contacting angels and trying to.
Well, he was contacting Cain's son Enoch, not Jared's son Enoch. That's where the Enochian language comes from. It was the one who brought forth the 7 sciences that the Book of Enoch talks about, Samyaza and Azazel. Well, it may turn out that they actually just got the information from Enoch, not Enoch from the Book of Enoch, but the other Enoch.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So, I mean, these, I'm sort of looking at this stuff now as like I'm totally established in my beliefs of what I think matters in religion, but I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable enough to go look into this stuff now and to not get swept up in a different belief that that would threaten sort of the simple gospel. But the idea of looking through screens into a different dimension, and that are you saying that you think like there's a spiritual aspect to just using screen technology, these black mirror sort of technologies, that's actually or is it just that's the method, the medium through which these communications are actually being sent?
Well, so I think that the way that it started was through, it was basically psychic communication, and they were telling people how to better communicate with them. So they started to build devices that would assist this process for, I don't know how long or whatever. But so I don't think that maybe there's not demons literally like right in my face as my computer's in my face or anything. But I do think that that is how, like you said, a medium of how to go from their dimension into our dimension, because like the different not radio, the different snow that you'll get on your TV, an old TV set, you would get snow. Like, what's that actually picking up? Is that picking up enough from another dimension, and then where our picture slowly comes in, and like, how are we actually sending that from one remote place to another remote place? And when you start thinking about it in those terms, it doesn't actually seem too out there that it is, dimensional travel, that it's just like you said, it's going through the air, it's going through our body somehow. What I'm projecting here from Georgia is hitting you in Canada, and and we're not connected by any wires. But even the wire type of thing, well, if we go back to the possible free energy that was around with what all these old buildings actually
Right,
were.
yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah, the antenna idea on top of all these structures.
The battery idea, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that maybe now we're all plugged in because there's something kind of condensed it all and maybe stole, I don't want to say stole, but maybe like somehow made it inaccessible to everybody, and you had to start using a plug in order to get the energy from whoever. It's just a thought.
Yeah, so I'll just say that my attitude in looking into that kind of stuff is that I don't think the capability of covering up those types of things is good enough to have gotten like complete suppression of the knowledge, where we have engineers today who are building, like, computers are way more advanced than I could ever understand, but there are people who code programs. There are people who set up their own, in the military, you have to be able to set up your own transmitters and receivers and things like that. And, there's not I don't know what to do with, actual professionals who deal in these fields who can explain how everything is working.
Are you familiar with cymatics?
No, I don't think so. No.
Cymatics are different sound frequencies that they're produced if you put sugar or sand or something on a speaker. I think it may be a certain type of speaker, or maybe a metal plate, and you run a frequency through it. It will.
Or it creates the shapes.
Yeah, and those exact shapes are what church windows are in the shape of, and the different antennas.
I see.
Yeah, and so there's different spires on top of all these different buildings. And when you look at it and you can compare it to actual scientific things, you can see that it's one and the same, that it's all completely set up the same in, I mean, exact ways, that the buildings are set up like devices. Now, how it all works, I'm not sure. But if you look into that aspect of it, because on the face of it, like you're saying, someone would be able to figure it out. But if you when you start approaching it from the cymatics, it's not unreasonable when you start to look at different devices, and you can, I mean, it's not easy to find, but there's stuff, the Great Deception podcast on Instagram, he's doing a lot of different stuff where he's doing side by side comparisons of the building versus a scientific device, and it's the same, and it's an energy thing, and I mean,
I
it's
did
pretty
see.
mind blowing.
I think I watched I watched 3 hours of like a 6 hour documentary
Oh
on
yeah, the
all of
lost
that.
history of
Right.
flat Earth. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I look at the cathedrals and the domes and the structure of that, and I see, um, I think there's a significance to it, but to me, the significance, just like the Capitol buildings of a lot of American uh, states, they all have the similar look to them, the domes and the arches and the pillars and stuff
Yeah,
like
the
that.
Greco style.
Yeah, it's like, to me, that is a reference back to Greek and Rome, and the idea that America and the modern world really is created in the image of the beast, and that the beast is ancient Rome. Rome incorporated as much Greek as it could, basically almost identical in a lot of ways, especially in the architecture. And so the architecture is a callback. It's a neoclassical style that calls back to that, and that's why you have the same imagery, the same architecture repeating itself in all these different parts of the world. Is that it's a way to call back to the roots of the Greco-Roman Empire, that it is created prophetically and spiritually in the image of the beast.
It could be. It could also be all from part of one civilization, one worldwide civilization, that maybe did exist in different pockets of the world. Because when we look at Tartaria, and there's different words that go along with Tartaria. I had Andreas Exertus on one episode, and he just started going on and on about all these different names. Barbarians would just be Tartarians. It would just be pronounced, it's written in a new way. Tartar sauce.
I see. Yeah.
Tyre would be how you might pronounce tar, Tartaria. There's so many different ways that it's just off a little bit, and maybe it was Tartaria was one thing, and maybe Lemuria was another thing. Maybe Lemuria is not even a real thing, but maybe, I think, honestly, so when I went to St. Augustine, and I was in, I think they call it like the oldest city on the East Coast or something, where the Spanish came. It was not Spanish stuff. I'm feeling it around, like the energy of it all. It was all Greek. I mean, it was all Greek, like originally Greek. And the Spaniards came over and stole it and said that they made it and that it was Spanish. But when you go to different parts of Georgia or anywhere up to, in the entire North America, it's all the same type of structures, all the same color schemes, all made at the same time. And they tell us they're Spanish, they tell us they're English, they tell us they're French, but they're none of those things. The English, French, and Spanish, this is my opinion, of course, they all stole it. They didn't steal it. They took it over. They found it. It always says founded in 1820. It doesn't says built
Right,
in
yeah.
1820, because that's literally when they found it, and then they just said it was theirs.
You know what, what you just brought up, that's the one aspect I can't take seriously, is when the word magic and the sort of idea of the spells comes in, because my main thing is like language. Growing up, and like things that I was studying always comes back to like an appreciation of language. I think English is a great language. And so like the roots of stuff like that is like, I'm sure but the Admiralty law sort of concept of how our society is created. I don't know if that ties in with Tartaria.
Banks and all that.
Banks and how we're vessels and we're in international waters and all this kind of language that they use. So many of those things are like, I take them as a joke, because it's too absurd to like believe that the word like founded. I mean, the word found has a root of like foundation. That's where that comes from. If you're founding something, you have a foundry, where you create stuff. It's like that already has a word. So I don't know where the language became like.
Are you aware of the Great Veil Shift?
No, well, not by that name, at least.
Okay, yeah, that's an academia thing. That you can look. It was the 1350s. It was the first time, and then in the 1800s, they completely switched. And this is why English is so messed up. They completely switched how they pronounce things. That's why you have steak and steak rhyme, but one's AKE, one's EAK, because which should be steak and steak, but they switched one and they didn't switch the other one, so they completely messed it up. And I really think that the Americas are not the New World. I think that there was a civilization here in the Americas, and they somehow disappeared or got conquered, whatever happened, and that everything was then mimicked from the Americas to the rest of the world in some respect. So I agree that it is funny, but the word magic is very real. I mean, when it's because what it really brings it down to, if on a simple concept, is like if you and I are speaking and I use one word that has multiple meanings, it's up to your perception of what I said. So it can be working on many different things on many different levels. And like you said, the maritime laws, yeah, it's very weird. But the sea is currency, and and what do we use to pay each other? Currency. And then we're electric beings, and there's a current that runs through everything. I mean, it all lines up that way. I don't. It is funny, but I think that it is a real thing that's happening.
Well, the one thing that I pick on in my book was the word doctor. And I know this is one thing that I've seen over and over. And when I did look at the TikTok videos on it, and I looked at different things, they talked about the idea that the word doctor and the idea of being in a hospital where you're in a that because you're at the dock when you come out of the womb, that's the idea of being delivered into this body of water, and the womb is this body of water. And it's like, okay, so I just looked at the word doctor, and I do this as an exercise in the book, is I just trace the word doctor to where it actually came from. And I guess you could say that that's all been covered up and changed, and we don't know where it actually came from. But there was an old Latin word, and it comes back from Latin. It's the word like docere, and it means to like teach. And there was doctors long before there were medical doctors. There were doctors of other things. It had nothing to do with births, and it had nothing to do with medicine. The first doctors, and the word English doctor was for theologians who were doctors of theology and things like that.
What if Latin came from English, actually? That maybe English, and it wouldn't be called English because they just stole it and called it their own thing, when the English got here. But because when anybody who speaks English, when they sing, they actually sound American. Nobody in the entire world sounds like another, I think that
Right.
the original language actually comes from here, and that Latin may have been a one world type of language from the Romans, or whoever. It was like an international language that you would know, and that's why they put all the laws and the medical stuff in Latin, so that it could be translated across all the countries, across the entire world.
That's a brilliant flipping of the existing history. I don't know why it would be justified. Like, what would justify the level, like, to hide the technology? Like, even those people who are creating that conspiracy, I don't know why they would bother with that. Like, couldn't they just oppress people with their technology if they wanted to? Or couldn't they, if they found this technology? My understanding of like human nature and the way that the power evolves with technology and with spirituality, with my timeline of prophecy that I created, it's like, what do you really gain by doing this whole admiralty law system of word magic and trapping people in the word games. And like, why is it only in the last 15 years that like people are snapping out of it? It just so happens to be at the same time that, literacy rates and people understanding history and old books is like at an all-time low. It's like people are more.
I think it's the spell that we've all been under for a long time. They do different spells on us, as I'm sure you're aware of. Like 9/11 was a huge mass ritual. I mean, there's so many of them that there's no reason to go into any of them, but they're huge mass rituals that really put us to sleep, and then we're just lulled. And it's easier to have a population, your slaves. It's easier if they're happy and they're obedient, and if they're checking themselves rather than you having to crack the whip to make them do everything. It's easier to trick them into doing the work for you and them thinking that they're doing the right thing and being good people by obeying. Because honestly, what these spirits are, so I'm an energy worker, and I'm a psychic, and I am spending a lot of time in the spirit realm, and they can't do anything to us, but they can trick us into hurting ourselves, and they can trick us into hurting each other. That's all they can really do. So they start to feed the ego of different people who are connecting with them. So maybe someone in the government will say, that certain bloodlines that are somehow attracted to them because they make deals, which is a very real thing with these Masons. Anyone who has Masons down in their history, family history, I can assure you that quote unquote aliens have had some interest in you, but they might not actually be aliens.
Right.
But that's what, we're led to believe in today's society. So there's so much deception because it's Satan, and they're essentially demons and fallen angels are pulling the strings from outside of this place, and that's really why they're not just doing it to us, like you're saying. They're not being so blunt and brutal about it because they can't. They have to trick us into it. We have to agree to it, and we have free will.
I see.
They can't really force us because it's the laws of nature.
Right. I see. So yeah, so that would be the core goal would be to get people to consent to their own enslavement, consent to the demonic rulership through ignorance and through having a confidence in a system that is all based on lies. I get that. Then that is interesting. Obviously, we could talk about all of this stuff for forever,
Right.
and I should probably tune into your other episodes and see where this all leads in the other places, because I don't like to talk too much about things that I don't understand. And like I said, I tried looking into a lot of this stuff, but right now my concern is the rapid development of the particular new agey sort of alternative views that threaten to hijack Christianity,
Right.
and people who are seeking the truth, but they're falling into sort of rabbit holes that don't lead to good places. And so I will continue to do research on this, obviously. And if I still had my TikTok account, I would be doing videos on everything and asking people for it and stuff. But yeah, so now I'm back to doing research and writing. I consider myself to be an author before a content creator online, but
You're doing great stuff. I mean, you're a great researcher. All the stuff that we've talked about tonight. I mean, you span a huge wealth of information, which not a lot of people do. So this is why I appreciate people like yourself, because it is the Bible. If you filter things through the Bible, it starts to make so much more sense. And I've just started to realize that myself. And when I'm really doing what I can, as you're saying, dispelling like the new age stuff, because I wasn't in New Age. I never had any teachers or anything. All the stuff that I learned was through meditation. So I'm very familiar with these spirits misleading people because they feed your ego, they give you information that you couldn't possibly know otherwise, and so on and so forth. And
Mm,
they really have you buy into, oh, I'm a god, and I
right.
can do all these amazing things because, like, I have superhuman abilities, but they weren't granted to me through some kind of beings working on me, upgrading me. This was granted to me through the grace of God because I, and I went into that field and learned a lot. And now I'm realizing the truth and I'm dispelling the lies. I'm going on other podcasts and trying to promote Jesus everywhere I go. I have my
Mm,
shirt on now, no Jesus, no peace. I always have the hat. I always have the bracelet, WWJD. I'm not a Christian. I don't identify with anything outside of myself, but I also am not a New Ager, and I never was. So I can really try to relate to people, and I can help them see the deception
right.
that there is, and the truth that is Jesus Christ. That is my ultimate goal, is finding the truth and being open. And I love having people like you on that are doing the same thing.
I've said before, and I'll say it again. I think everybody comes from such different backgrounds, but the goal is to end up in the same place, to
Hmm.
end up without institutional controls over us, what we think and believe, to have a personal relationship with God. I know Catholics I've talked to, and I talk so much about Catholicism and what I do, but I do not hate Catholics. I love Catholics. I want them to understand that they could be free from that system and have a much better relationship with Jesus as a result. And
Hmm.
and I feel like that's the case everywhere I go, is that, and I'm trying to learn how to not be prejudiced when I hear something that is so different from what I normally believe.
Right.
But it's like, wait, this person is like seeking Jesus the same way I am, and I come from, my perspective, raised Christian, but with a very limited perspective. And other people come from totally different backgrounds, and we end up so close together in what we're looking into and what we're trying to
Hmm.
accomplish. So yeah, I appreciate the invitation, and it sounds like you're right on the right track. And I would come back and talk again sometime if you'd like. But either way, like, I appreciate the offer, because uh, so many different audiences. One of the things I loved most about TikTok was like hearing from people who had horrible experiences in the past when they were growing up. Some of them were part of, you know, satanic ritual abuse and different
Hmm.
things like that. And I'm just like, oh my God, I knew about these things, but I didn't meet the people, I didn't
Hmm.
actually have somebody telling me firsthand that they had experienced different things. And so that keeps my mind more open, and that grounds me in the idea of this universal quest that we have for greater truth and for compassion and healing. And really it comes back down to what Jesus taught about in the gospel.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to end it, my friend. I am. This episode is phenomenal. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to touch on.
Sure.
Was uh, I loved the part about the Jesuits trying to measure the earth, the sky,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
under the earth. It was really brilliant, and I'll say this: it gave me a vision that a flash in my third eye, so to speak, a prophetic vision. When you're speaking, I'm seeing that there is a projection of stars, that you can't trust the stars now because they aren't real, because there's a projection over or underlying it, so that we don't see the real sky. That I don't know how long it's been like that, but we are seeing what they're showing us, that this maybe the satellites are projecting. Maybe that's Project Bluebeam, as the stars and the sky that we're seeing. I don't know, but this is the vision that it triggered in me. But so why don't you say this important part of
I will
your.
very much. I forgot about that myself, but yeah, I'll definitely gladly explain it. So there is a verse in Jeremiah in the Bible, Jeremiah 31:37, and it talks about how, and there's, as I explained in the book, there's no reason God needed to say this. This is not it's people ignore it actually because it's considered to be sort of just a promise that God is always going to protect Israel and is always never going to cast them off. But what it says is that God says that if the heavens above can be measured and the foundations of the earth below can be searched out, then that's an if statement. If you can do this, then I will cast off the seed of Israel for all that they have done. And I believe that occultists and Satanists don't take that as a rhetorical statement or a impossible thing to achieve. They believe they can measure the heavens and search out the foundations of the deep, and that if they can accomplish that, they can break the covenant of God with Israel, and by extension, Jesus, because Jesus is a child of Israel. He is a Jew. He is a part of that family, and he identifies himself as such. And that what happened is that people used to believe they were measuring the heavens through astrology, through looking at zodiacs and signs in the sky, and being able to navigate by magnetism and the compass and all of these types of different ways of measuring the heavens. But that with the Jesuits, what happened is that they achieved a level of technology and scientific understanding that allowed them to go into hyperdrive when it comes to this. So astronomy, as we know it today, was basically founded by the Jesuits. It was the 1500s. 1540 is when the Jesuits were officially founded. And the third rider, which I believe that's the Jesuits. The third rider of Revelation is black, and it says that he had a pair of scales in his hand. That's the description. It's a very tiny description for the third rider. He's black and he has a pair of scales in his hand. Now, everybody assumes that the third rider either represents famine for some reason, because the next verse talks about the price of wheat and different food. I don't think that's very important. I think the description of the third rider having a pair of scales represents measurement, because scales are one of the oldest measuring devices in history. It was around at the time of Jesus, and that's how they measured gold and determined, the value of gold by weighing it here with lead and gold and stuff like that. And it continues to be a symbol in our society to this day of Lady Justice with the blindfold and the scales of justice. It's part of the justice system. In administration, in laws, in finance, and in science. And so I think that the ability to measure the heavens and search out the foundations of the earth was, in a sense, granted to the Jesuits by God through prophecy, not in total, not so that they can actually accomplish it, but just enough so that they can believe that they can accomplish it, so that they can pursue this, what I call the Jeremiah 31:37 loophole, to race towards, before the prophetic fulfillment is complete, like they have a limited time in which to do all of these prophetic goals, to try to measure the heavens. And that's why you have this nonstop obsession with astronomy, with exploring space, with, if you believe flat earth and the dome or whatever, it ties in with that whole idea of course, of trying to reimagine the way that the universe is and not let other people understand it. I personally believe the Jesuits correctly understood a lot of the galaxy and the stars and astronomy. A lot of astronomy is real, and that they're just failing to understand it, because the more you measure the universe, the more you actually realize that you don't know anything. You see coincidences and phenomena that can't be explained through evolution and the Big Bang and all of these things. And so as they are trying to quote unquote measure the heavens, theoretical physicians they talk about the universe expanding at the speed of light. So there's not a set size of the universe. So they have to try to understand instead, they have to try to understand a formula for the universe that would encapsulate all the properties of the universe, the mass, the density, the vibrations, the every aspect you could, because measuring doesn't just mean physical size. It means, you can measure the weight of something, the speed of something, the rotation of something, the vibrational frequencies of something. There's all sorts of ways to measure the heavens. And I believe that is the kind of the core goal of this Jesuit 500-year time that we've had since then, is to, and in the process, what they've done is they've unlocked technology. That's where I think all this crazy technology has come from, is that they've contacted demons, they've contacted spirits in their pursuit of measuring the heavens. They've had this sort of pacts they've made with demons in order to try to measure everything, and that their goal is to break the covenant with Jesus before he comes back, so that when Jesus comes back down to earth, the covenant will no longer exist, and Satan can destroy Jesus, because they will have measured the heavens and searched out the foundations of the deep. And as I point out in the book, the Jesuits are, if you look it up, Jesuits are the world leader pioneers in two fields of science: astronomy and seismology, which is earthquakes, searching out the deep, searching out the foundations of tectonic plates, as they call them. Who knows how the earth is actually created? It might not be tectonic plates at all, but they're field experts in those exact two things, astronomy and in seismology. So to me, that tied it all together. I'm very proud of that theory. And
yeah, I think that one holds super true.
Yeah. The
scales in the hand as well, it's all there.
It's there. And what tied in with me very even more so was that when you look at the events of Revelation, what do they involve? They involve falling stars, heavenly events, the sun going dark, the moon turning to blood, and different things like that, and giant earthquakes. So you have the heavens and you have the earth shaking and giant earthquakes, and you have stars falling. Maybe the Jesuits, when I say Jesuits, I mean this entire school of occult science that has been born out of it. But maybe they get the technology to create earthquakes that are so powerful that they can basically destroy entire nations by the end. Maybe that's a human thing that we see when we see these giant earthquakes in Revelations, and they're trying to destroy Israel or whatever they're trying to destroy, and the stars falling. Like, why did they have this suddenly the 2030 timeline for everything? Why are there certain time goals that they're racing towards at light speed right now? It's like, maybe they know from studying the heavens that is the prophetic cutoff point, where after that things are going to change. So to me, I don't know what the connection is exactly, but that's enough for me to believe that they're trying to fulfill that loophole, so that when the man of sin, Antichrist character comes on the scene, Jesus comes down to wage war, they will believe that they are on the winning side, because they don't believe that they're going to lose. And they just have to fulfill this one loophole. And because God can't contradict himself, and he's not going to be a liar, that's their guarantee that, hey, we've measured the heavens. The only trick is, of course, the reason why God is infinitely smarter than them is that God is the one who decides whether they fulfilled that properly. So they can think that they fulfilled it, but they don't know. If God has something else that they don't know about, and then they didn't succeed. So I have full confidence that God is going to win, and that their entire plan is going to backfire. But so
is this God dangling the carrot from the stick in front of them, in order for them to get it?
Exactly. And in the process, what happens is that he provokes them to create more and more technology, more and more crazy things, transhumanism, trying to merge with AI, trying to evolve to the point where they can actually uncover the mysteries of the universe, so that they can fulfill this. Because Satan has one major challenge, and that'll be the return of Christ. And so everything leading up to that is this race that they're being provoked into by God, I think. And so God has total control of the situation. And what they're doing is really a futile race to their own destruction. And but it's in the process, it's going to expose, like it is now, it's exposing how evil they are, how arbitrary, that nobody understands why they're spending trillions of dollars trying to measure the heavens.
Right.
Nobody can tell me why that's worth
why
all
aren't
that
we
money.
feeding the homeless? I mean, feeding the poor and clothing the homeless. These types of things.
Exactly, but they're obsessed with this. Every major university, you're not even considered to be a real school if you don't have this astronomy at the heart of it. And it's like, we think that we're past the age of zodiacs and astrology, but in a way it just got rebranded as astronomy. And the people who are doing the research don't realize it, but they're contributing to this enterprise. And then a lot of people have pointed this out when I brought it up on TikTok and other places. They're like, the giant telescope that the Jesuits use, the Vatican telescope, is called Lucifer.
Yeah, in Arizona.
Yeah. Which, of course, Lucifer means like light bearer, or so it's a term related to light. And so, yes, a telescope takes in light and stuff, but like that can't be a coincidence.
And it's an acronym. It's the dumbest thing. It's like, I don't even know. It's so stupid. And it's like, that's so obvious.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
and the fallen angels are the stars. The book of Enoch tells us that the fallen angels, they're the watchers. And what's watching the earth? The stars. They watch us. And they fell to the earth. And now we have wandering stars that we call planets. It's all very, and they're locked into orbit, which the Bible in the book of Enoch says they're going to be locked in chains, and they're going to be made to worship God, which they're locked in orbit around the sun, and the sun is kind of in charge of the solar system, right? So in one sense, it's God, in that terminology. Yeah. So
there's something to all of that, again, I'm comfortable saying, here's some evidence, here's an argument, but God knows all the mysteries, and I'm excited to find out how it plays out. But I never go as far as to say that I know how it works. That's actually why the book is called Maybe Everyone Is Wrong, is that I admit that I don't know. Like, I could be wrong too, but I don't think anyone has the answers. And that's where I hope that people will get excited about the Word of God and study it as much as they can, and keep open-minded about it. And that's good enough. We don't have to have all the answers ourselves. And so, but this is the kind of theory that comes out of that, is to think like, you read one verse, one prophecy, and you start connecting the dots with what's going on in today's world. And you see the conspiracy tie in with prophecy, tie in with scripture, tie in with history. And that's what I love. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and that's a great way to tie it all in, because it really is where we are now. And I really am enjoying your book. I don't know if I said it early in the podcast or if this was before we started recording, but I'm about halfway through now, or somewhere around there. And
right,
I mean, I can't wait to get the rest of it in. And it's a lot to take in, because it is very different, and you tie in so many different things that just history, as you were just saying, history, prophecy, scripture, you're tying it all in. So it is very deep, but I love the way that you're doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for putting it all out there, doing all this research and coming to all these conclusions. And my favorite part about anybody that I talk to these days is them just having an open mind. And you came here and you crushed it with all of your own ideas, and you have the open mind of, oh yeah, I looked into all this, I looked into all that, I looked at, a lot of people come on, they know their one field, but then I was presenting new ideas to you, well, my ideas to you, not new ones, that you were already aware of. So it's awesome to get to speak to somebody about these types of things.
I'm glad, because I ideally, in the perfect world, I would have the ability to talk to anybody about the Bible and about what they believe and their backgrounds and stuff. I don't want to be ignorant about where people are coming from. And I do believe that we all have a little bit of insight to contribute to the big mystery. And so you certainly have very interesting and insightful views on these different things. And
Well, thank you.
I'm interested, and I'll continue to be interested. And if you have resources and stuff, I'm sure we'll talk after this and stay in touch, and you can send me all sorts of interesting stuff because I want to learn more. So
Awesome.
I look forward to it.
All right. Well, so do you want to tell my audience where they can find you and your book?
Sure. One of the easiest ways to just follow my stuff generally is I'm on Twitter. My handle is @Wolfpox, WOLFPOX. That was my handle on TikTok. I have a YouTube channel. Also, the username is Wolfpox, but you can look up Terry Wolfe. That's my name. Terry Wolfe on YouTube. I'm on Telegram.
Does that have an E at the end of Wolf or no?
There is an E at the end of Wolf. It's a good thing to mention that. I do lectures on there, usually hour-long lectures on some stuff that's very interesting. It ties in with a lot of what we've talked about here. And I have Telegram, which is I'm finding to be a great platform, kind of a free speech platform where you can update on all sorts of stuff. That's Wolfpox News. So I find the link that I always give people is t.me/Wolfpox News, because t.me is the Telegram shorthand, and then /Wolfpox News is the how you get a link to the actual channel itself. And the book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. Digitally, it's available in more places. Apple Bookstore. It's actually available in like 6 or 7 different places. I'm not gonna remember all of them. Main one is obviously Amazon, and then Barnes and Noble is a great alternative if you don't want to support Amazon because they're not exactly a good company. But yeah, it's digital and it's paperback. It's not expensive. It's not very long either. And then I do have the podcast that you've been listening to on Spotify or whatever. It's called the Not Done Yet podcast.
I love the name, by the way, too.
Yeah, I like the name. It's reflects that the attitude I'm reminding myself of all the time, which is don't pretend that you're finished yet with your study, with anything. Just keep looking into things. So the Not Done Yet podcast is on Spotify, iTunes, and a couple of other places as well, a bunch of different podcasts sources. So look that up. And beyond that, I think those are the main ones. I also just wolfpox.com. If you go there, there's links to pretty much everything. And I have some PDF files, some essays that I've written that I'm going to continue to write and post on there for free. You can go there and download. So if you want to just check out the website, it has links to everything.
Well, that's fantastic. You are doing awesome work, my friend. And obviously you're in many places. You're doing what you can to spread the word. And you're not here for a money grab, obviously. You are here to
I give away the information if I can.
Right. You're here to spread the knowledge. And,
also I just have to remember, I just started using Instagram, and I do have an Instagram handle. It is @RealWolfpox. So there was already somebody who stole the name Wolfpox, but the Real Wolfpox is the Instagram handle. I should just mention that.
Okay. Yeah, but there's nothing more godly than just trying to spread the truth, trying to find the truth as best you can, and turn around and give it away as you're doing. And of course, I'll try to have all the links in the description. Is there? So I do like to ask my guests as we go out: is what is your go-to thing to ground you, to make you human? What is your one thing to do when maybe you're lost and confused, or you need to step away because you found something crazy, in your research? What is one thing that really grounds you?
This is something I've only discovered in the last year, but to go back to the Lord's Prayer and say it in a different way than you've said it before, but as simple as it is, I got taught it when I was growing up, and I just sort of rehearsed it without thinking about it. But really, when you think about it, the Lord's Prayer has everything you need. It talks about your daily bread, just that's so minimal. It's like, that's all that you should be asking for. Anything beyond that is a blessing. You know, emphasizing the kingdom, you know, thy kingdom come. It's about him and his kingdom. It's not about us. And, you know, it's about serving in that kingdom. And so the Lord's Prayer really to me is when I get too full of myself, or even when I'm too down on myself, either way, I come back to the Lord's Prayer and I think about it in a new perspective. And that sets me back to where I feel like I should be.
That is wonderful, my friend. There you have it, folks. I mean, Terry came here and he really, I mean, you set this place on fire. It was a great conversation, and
It was very engaging. I love it.
Yeah, I look forward to having more in the future. So we'll say goodbye to our audience. Goodbye, everybody. We will talk to you guys later.